precious relics give us glimpses of the people who once lived here, a people who survived, often against extraordinary odds. When I studied to become an archaeologist, it was the sheer challenge of understanding this ancient world that attracted me, and the legacy that its people left behind. I've come to the coast of South Wales to try and see some of the most intimate and poignant remains in the whole of Britain. Out there, beneath the waves, are a few of the most fragile and fleeting traces imaginable of a group of hunters who came here 8,000 years ago. The added challenge out here, as well as the tides, you've also got to deal with the fact that this fantastic evidence is usually concealed under feet of mud as these banks shift about.
So we've got a footprint there. You can just see the big toe, the heel, emerging from the mud. With the side of the foot, the heel prominently marked, the arch of the foot, and then the big toe and the rest of the toes.
So rather than being a depression, the way they've been preserved is gradually filling the print with material. So they appear almost as a mould of the original footprint.
Yes.
That's one of the best things I've ever seen. I knew about them, but until you see them, it just doesn't seem possible.
What have we got here, then?
The prints reveal men, women, and children. An entire group of nomadic hunter-gatherers. That's not a fossil of that person that day. That is the very day.
But what's interesting here, of course, is that these are very obviously part of a trail. There's another print there, rather poorly preserved one.
That would be the big toe there.
Yes,
and that's the ball of the heel.
That's the right foot of the same person, isn't it?
These were people who relied utterly on the natural resources of wild plants and the animals that lived alongside them. If you were to be offered the chance to live this life, would you fancy it? Is it an easy life?
They were subject to the natural hazards of the environment, the bad season, the harsh winter, the year when the fish simply didn't turn up. So there would have been times when these communities were under extreme pressure and extreme difficulty.
8,000 years ago, right there. When you delve into the distant past, you soon realise that what you're discovering again and again are stories of survival. Sometimes of evidence, like those faint footprints in the mud. Other times, it's the stories of people defying the odds in a hostile world. A world in which your very existence as a hunter-gatherer depends completely on your understanding of and your connection to the natural environment. Within the storerooms of London's Natural History Museum are the remains of someone who lived a staggeringly long time ago. So long ago that this human has even been classed as a different species. It's a real privilege to see these and to be so close to them. I can feel my hand starting to shake just with being in their vicinity. These are the oldest human remains ever found in Britain. It's two pieces of the same shin bone and two teeth. They were dug up at a place called Boxgrove in Sussex. The two teeth have got tiny scratches on them, and it's thought that they were caused by the way that this person ate meat. That the meat would be gripped in the teeth, and then the other bit slashed away at with a tool. There's enough of the shin bone to let us estimate that the individual stood about 1.8 metres tall, weighing 14 stone. It's always been known as Boxgrove man, but of course from this there's no way of absolutely determining the sex. So it could be Boxgrove woman. So 14 stone and looking like a boxer should have been quite a showstopper. Heaven knows what her boyfriend was like. But perhaps most amazingly of all, Boxgrove man lived 500,000 years ago. Think of that, 500,000 years. Chris Stringer is a world expert on our ancient human ancestry. So what follows Boxgrove in the human story?
Well, about 100,000 years later, at Swanscombe in Kent, we've got these human bones, the back part of a skull, beautifully preserved, but it has one interesting feature here. That little depression is something we find in all the Neanderthals. So we think Swanscombe could be a very early member of the Neanderthal line of evolution.
So there's Neanderthals in Britain 400,000 years ago?
That's right, very early ones, and then for the next 300,000 or 400,000 years, whenever we find people in Britain, they're part of this evolving Neanderthal lineage.
And it was tools like this that they were making?
Absolutely, yes. This is a hand axe, one of tens of thousands that have been found in the gravels at Swanscombe. So these people were making these tools and probably using them to butcher animal carcasses.
It's amazing, while on the one hand you're talking about a different species of human, different from us, and yet the tools that they made and used fit so naturally into the hand.
There's a real link to the humanity of these people, even if they are a different species from us.
At what point, then, do we get modern human beings like you and I?
Well, much later on. Now, modern humans had been evolving in Africa while the Neanderthals were evolving in Europe and coming to Britain. And about 50 or 60,000 years ago, those modern humans started to come out of Africa, and 40,000 years ago, they're in France. And here's one of the stone tools they were making there.
OK, so that's been made by hands the same as ours?
Absolutely.
Imagine living in a world where there are different species of people, never mind different races or different nationalities.
There were several human species on Earth. We were just one of those experiments going on how to be human.
Buckland didn't know it at the time, but he was about to discover more than some ancient animal bones. This was going to be the discovery of his life. Entering the cave would have been fantastically exciting for Buckland. As soon as he crossed the threshold, he'd have fired up his lamp, and then, a good scientist that he was, he'd have begun to make a careful assessment of everything he could see, the whole scene, and all of that he recorded in meticulous detail. This is a book called Reliquiae Diluviani, Relics of the Flood. And this volume is one of just a couple of copies of the first edition still in existence. It contains within it a depiction of the scene exactly as Buckland saw it and then drew it. Buckland has very helpfully drawn the whole scene. There's the cave itself from the outside, there's the cliff wall and the man coming down on a rope on the outside. But more interestingly, he's made what is effectively an excavation plan of the floor of the cave. Here are the elephant bones and tusks that drew him to this cave in the first place. More intriguingly, he's also drawn a full-size human skeleton, and it's that human skeleton that secured this cave its place in our history. It was Buckland himself who discovered it, uncovering it from beneath about 6 inches of earth, right here, where I'm crouched down. What on earth was going on here? And more importantly, who on earth was it? As it happened, Buckland originally thought he'd found the remains of a local prostitute who had worked here during Roman times, and that when she'd eventually died, she'd been buried in there, far away from civilized society. The Red Lady of Pavaland. But Buckland was wrong, because he'd actually stumbled upon human remains from a far more distant past. Today, the Red Lady is kept at the Oxford University Museum of Natural History. Although there's no skull, much of the skeleton has survived. enough for scientists to reveal its story.
Within a few decades of Buckland's death, people re-examined the skeleton. They looked at the shape of the pelvis, the shape of the long bones, the shape of the articulation surfaces. Any anatomy student today would recognise this as a skeleton not of a young woman, but of a young man.
Forensic analysis also revealed that the so-called Red Lady died young, in his late 20s. But most importantly, his bones could also reveal just how long ago he lived.
All plants and animals on Earth build themselves predominantly out of carbon. A tiny proportion of that carbon is radioactive carbon, or carbon-14. When an animal dies, the amount of carbon-14 begins slowly to decline and degrade away.
This process, called carbon dating, used a tiny amount of bone from the Red Lady. Carbon atoms from the bone gave scientists a date for when he was alive. An astonishing 33,000 years ago. These are the remains of the very first modern human known to have inhabited our land.